YouTube, Mark here, with a very small video in which I talk about backwards compatibility on the Xbox One. A couple of friends and myself, we've been on the Xbox One backwards compatibility, but just I'm not going to talk about that necessarily, but just you know what it means to me to be able to play these games on the Xbox One. Their backwards compatibility, there's always been quite a controversy around that, whether or not it is a good thing, whether or not people should pay for it. The thing is, it depends on how you look at games as a medium, as an entertainment medium. If you treat games as a throwaway, here and now form of entertainment without any longevity, then it being on a throwaway medium, it being on a non-compatible medium, a digital download that is just going to disappear, that's okay. The thing is, if you want to treat games like stories or like pieces of music, or like, you know, it's the way we tell stories. I mean, games are a way in which we tell stories. If you treat it like that, perhaps then we do need to change something about how we approach these games, because the stories we tell in books, there's no expiration date on a book. There's no incompatibility with a book. Well, unless perhaps it's written in such an ancient tongue or form of Dutch or English or whatever that you aren't able to understand it anymore. But basically you'll be able to enjoy the medium as it is. And of course there have been sound media that weren't compatible with one another, but that was in an era where sound media was still heavily developed. You know, 8-track, compact cassette, reel-to-reel, vinyl, whatever, you know, records. The thing is, if during the era of the CD and everything that came after that, disc-based media often has been backwards compatible. So your latest Blu-ray player is actually capable of playing audio CDs, is capable of playing DVDs, is capable of playing Blu-rays. Of course, an old DVD player won't be able to play Blu-ray, but yeah, there's a continuity in the library of people. So people are still able to play CDs, and people still buy CDs. But most of the new and the young and hip and happening people, they go for MP3 or streaming media. But yeah, that's the thing. Now, when it comes to games have always come on a proprietary cartridge or disc or whatever, and they could only be played back on the same device. Well, Sony broke that. Actually, Sega broke that because they made the Genesis, the Megadrive, backwards compatible with the Sega Master System. Basically, it contains a Sega Master System within, so you can play Sega Master System games on the Mega Drive or the Genesis, which is a good thing, I think. Same goes for Sony with the PlayStation. They made the PlayStation 2 backwards compatible with the PlayStation 1. They made the PlayStation 3 initially backwards compatible with the PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation 1. In later models they took away the PlayStation 2 backwards compatibility, cost measures, and they only left PlayStation 1 backwards compatibility in. Now later on they did decide to put PlayStation 2 backwards compatibility back in, but only if you would download or buy the game in the PlayStation 2 game in digital form. Now, if you already owned said PlayStation 2 game, you would have to download it again, pay for it again, and you'll be able to play the PlayStation 2 game on your PS3. It's a crying shame that Sony did not put PS2 backwards compatibility into the PlayStation 3 as an entire the entire range, because the PlayStation 2 more or less is the most successful console of all time. It has sold the most games, it has a huge library, and for some reason not to have access to that library on a new platform it takes away some of the momentum, I guess. It fractures the library, and perhaps I'm just I'm just an insane dude with who wants to be able to play all sorts of stuff on their console. No, I prefer playing PlayStation 1 games on my PlayStation 1 and not my PlayStation 2. But back in the day, for a lot of people, the PlayStation 2 was one of the first DVD players they owned, and they played a lot of their PlayStation 1 games still on the PlayStation 2, and they used the PlayStation 2 parts as a DVD player. So same goes for the PlayStation 3 to some extent. I guess that was a good Blu-ray player, where the software that was out there for it wasn't anything to write home about. I mean, I always want to have a certain number of games, a certain number of apps available on a system before I buy it, or I must have the must-have game for it. But for the PlayStation 3, for the longest time, I didn't have any such game or application available. That came later on. So when I got to finally buy a PlayStation 3, it actually was the first generation PlayStation Slim, and now I have two, a first generation and a second generation PlayStation 3 Slim. With the PlayStation 4, there's two games that I wanted to have it for, Drive Club and the other racing game, which I forgot. So that's how I was looking forward to it. And the Xbox One, Forza 5 and Forza Horizon 2. Strangely enough, Forza Horizon 2 also came out for the Xbox 360. But I haven't been buying a lot of games. For all the previous generations, including actually the Wii U, I've been buying a ton of games to play them or to save them for a rainy day, or being able to play them a bit later on. Now, for all these multiplayer server heavy, relying on third-party servers, these games are not very appealing to me, because the moment I enter the multiplayer facility, most of the people will already have left, or the servers are still being populated by the people that are just ridiculously good at those games, and I don't stand a chance at all. So I'm all over the place. Point is, on the newer systems, the games you get, the downloads you have to make, the digital distribution, that's something that actually that actually stops me from buying a lot of games, because the whole distribution method is different. I mean, you cannot really collect for the system. It's more of a consumer in the here and now type of product, the game. And there's actually nothing lasting or nothing really appealing to it, except, it's high-tech, it's fancy graphics, and in the here and now it plays fantastic games. Same goes for the Xbox 360. But then, this last E3, Microsoft announced backwards compatibility, and thank you. I'm not sure who actually got me into the beta program, but thank you, because I've been experiencing it. I'm not going to talk about that experience because I think there's some sort of clause preventing me to do that, but I'm just going to talk about, you know, backwards compatibility in general. I think Microsoft really made a huge and great, grand move with introducing backwards compatibility on the system, on the Xbox One, backwards compatibility with the Xbox 360 games. In a very similar fashion to how it is done on the Xbox 360 with original Xbox games, only they plan to do it in an even better way by well, basically providing you with the same services as the Xbox 360 will do. What that does, I mean, I've got a ton, I really have got a ton of digital downloads. I've got a ton of live arcade games on the Xbox 360, really. I mean, the wife and I, we first got that console. It was actually the first console in our household that really was heavily connected into the internet, where you had scores, where you could compare leaderboards, and you could easily download cheap games. And that was very, you know, we played a lot. We were in the here and now. We just, you know, we played a ton of games, and it was fun. And I never really thought about it until one day my original Xbox, my release day Xbox, and I got that for Geometry Wars actually, broke down. Red ring of death. No way to repair it. It was just beyond salvation. So I bought a new one. I bought, and it actually, I mean, it lasted me a long, long time. And I actually got one of the Slims, the new Xbox Slims, a matte finish. I also have another one with a lacquered finish, but the matte finish with a huge hard drive in it. And the thing was, I could only play my games, the download games, when I was logged in to Microsoft on that different console, that new console. So if I wasn't using internet, I could not play the full games, and everything reverted back to demo. Now that really got me thinking, because that's the scary thing. You know, you actually bought your games, but they're not working unless you verify your use on the internet. Now, Microsoft does it that way. You can actually play your games on a different console. The moment you log into that different console and the system knows it's you, the live arcade games are full games and you can play them. On the Wii and on other Nintendo handhelds, the software is tied to the machine, so that copy will only work with that specific machine, which is a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that it doesn't need that external server check. The bad thing is that it is tied to the machine, so if that machine breaks, there's well, I think it's possible, but there's actually no real way to get all those downloadable games, those virtual console games, back on another Wii or another Wii U. So two approaches, you know, server control or tied to the machine. Anyways, digital downloads, the DLC stuff, I mean, it really made me think that the new generation of consoles really wasn't my cup of tea. But then, now with this E3, Microsoft actually letting users vote for the games that they want to have and they want to play on the Xbox 360, on Xbox 360 games on the Xbox One. And, well, initially they say that they will make a lot of the games available for it. And wouldn't it be something if I was able to play my entire library of games, where the previous consoles and the content of the previous consoles would just, you know, be accessible still. I think if we are to treat this media as a media that is here to stay, a media that we tell our grandchildren about. I mean, we've all been playing the Atari 2600. If it could have been your own, but it also could have been your dad's or your granddad's. Those cartridges still work, and the stories that your dad, your granddad, or you yourself remember playing that, they play a vital role in our, upbringing, in our personal history. A digital downloadable game, how fantastic it was if you can't access it anymore, if it's just dead bytes on a computer. Where will those stories be? Those stories will only be in the heads of the people who've experienced them, and on the drives of the servers of the people that want to earn a buck from those games. But it takes a lot away from games as storytelling, a way of storytelling. So I think a company that actually, without extra cost, because a lot of companies have been providing backwards compatibility at a cost, you had to buy the games again. Well, Microsoft just says, well, stick in this disc, the system will recognize the disc that you put into it, it'll download an optimized version for the Xbox One, so you do need a hard drive, but it allows you to play, and it'll check with the server, of course. But the thing is that if Microsoft actually, I mean, if they are really doing this, and perhaps even putting what is it? I mean, time out. The original Xbox, the live arcade version on that actually was supported quite substantially by Microsoft, but it was a different platform on the new Xbox 360. When the Xbox One came out, what happened was actually that the Xbox Live on the 360 and Xbox Live on the Xbox One basically more or less is the same system, much like PSN and Sony is doing with PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4. So they have a whole continuum of games, and I think putting different variants of the game for various platforms on it, and it not really matter, and where it doesn't really matter which of the gaming systems of that company you're using, but you get access to your content, I think that is a good thing, because if it's a big company, and if it puts a lot of money and effort into providing the customers with an ecosystem in which they store and retrieve their games that they own, and if they make it very clear that whatever your console you play on, you'll get access and you remain to get access to your games without any extra cost, I think that's a good thing. That shows a responsible and an adult way of how to deal with digital download and digital distribution, where you're not squeezing the customer dry for every last penny, but you say, hey, you bought that content, we have a ton of new content on the new console, but if you want to play your old games on the new system, we'll make it possible in the most smooth and most effective way. You just have one system and you could get access to all your games. It doesn't really matter what you turn on, but the newer system, if you turn that on, you get access to even more games and even faster. So yeah, I think that's a good thing. And really, this news for me is actually quite big. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of digital download, but I've used it. I've used it on the Vita. I've used it on the PlayStation 3. But I'm not a big fan. I consider it actually money that I just threw out. It's non-retrievable entertainment in some ways. But with companies doing stuff like this backwards compatibility, allowing you to remain getting access to your old content is cool. And I'm not sure how many people are still playing the old games on the Xbox 360, but I actually play a lot of the old live arcade games, because they're just amazing games. And yeah, same for the Xbox 360 games. I mean, that generation of PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360, still has a lot of games. They age well. They really age well. And of course, if you look at a new Xbox 360 game or an old Xbox 360 game, there's a huge difference. And of course, if you jump up to the Xbox One, the difference is even more enormous. But and you get used to that. So, but you know, yeah, I think it's a good thing. And I'm very curious if you think it's a good thing. Is it a gimmick? Is it something that all the console makers or all the people providing software should actually stick to? That there's this emulation layer, this legacy support. I mean, you could have it in a software way. I mean, our systems are so powerful, and if you make the jump to the new hardware iteration powerful enough, you can do it in software. But keep the stuff available, because that's what it is all about, I think. I mean, and then if that's something that they really go for, then it even may be fun to collect for the modern systems again, because you know that on another generation your games will be able to play. But I mean, I think this is the first time in human history that something like this is actually happening, that there's so many generations of gamers, and I'm actually among the oldest generation of gamers, you know, the ones that actually grew up with the Atari, that were kids when the Atari 2600 was huge. So 40-somethings, 50-somethings. That generation is now adults. They've experienced games for a long time, and I think this is a very important demography, because well, there's a lot of older gamers out there, I think, and it's not just the youth. Of course, kids and children, I mean, yeah, great, but there's also a lot of older gamers that just don't fall for being treated like a milking cow. No pun intended. So, I mean, what Microsoft does now is actually treat the customers, or has the intention to treat customers as customers that they are willing to provide a service for. I think it's a good thing. It's not like tough luck. You are out. You bought these games. Well, you know, just turn on one of these aging Xbox 360s, and if they fail, well, tough luck. You know, I think it's a good thing. And I'm very curious what your thoughts on the subject are. Mark signing off, and I'll be back with another video soon. And now I have to turn that off.